Hello everyone and welcome to another Pokemon Pocket video. Today it's about that time of the week again where we are going to be looking at some of the top tournament lists here. Once more, of course, we have Ursiidays Pocket Weekly up to number 15 now. I believe this had over 1,800 players, so an absolutely huge number of players to get some good sort of current meta data and sample size from. So let's take a look. As usual, we'll take a bit of an overview, then we'll jump into what some of the decks are going to look like and what's actually doing well and what's struggling a little bit. So at the top, of course, we have Darkrai Magnezone with 223 players here, so roughly 11%. There are other Darkrai decks that we'll discuss in a minute, of course. But yeah, it's Darkrai Magnezone. If you've played over the last week, you've probably played against this deck on the ladder at some point. It's doing okay as well. 51% win rate, with that being 10% of the meta, and it's still winning over half the games. It's pretty impressive. So yeah, this Darkrai Magnezone list is looking pretty good. We'll take a quick look at the top one, but I don't think there's anything too crazy about it. Some people are like maybe playing Kangaskhan. You know, there's a couple of like small different card choices, but overall it's generally 2 Druddigon, 2 Magnezone, 2 Darkrai as your Pokemon. And then your usual mix. Here, Leaf is pretty much needed because of Druddigon, of course. But outside of that, you can run 1 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus, which is becoming more and more common. There's the 1 Cape here, 1 Comms, and then your regulars. So pretty solid list again. Magnezone, I don't think is going anywhere anytime soon. Even though there are ways to sort of try and beat it and to try and counter it, it's still just extremely strong. So I won't spend too much time on the deck list we all pretty much know quite well by now. Moving on, though. This surprised me a little bit, maybe because it did so well in the previous tournament last week. But Charizard Moltres second in terms of, again, we'll talk about decks like Exeggutor. Obviously, Darkrai as a Pokemon is going to have a few more lists. But Charizard Moltres second, but only rocking a 47% win rate. This, to me, is expected. I think Charizard Moltres has a couple of good matchups. However, it can struggle versus a lot of the others. So if we look here, a lot of this, you know, we have some players performing very, very well. We have obviously the 11-0 in the Swiss, which is huge, honestly. Very, very, very impressive. This might be, hang on, let me double check. 8, 10, 5, 5. Yeah, I think it was actually 10 rounds, and this is a score from the playoffs that's happening on the top cut, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, this pretty straightforward list, honestly. 2 Charizard, 2 Moltres, and then your usual suspects. Most players are running the 1 Giant Cape to help out with Charizard health a lot of the time. And then, of course, we have the Leaf in there, as well as some X speeds to make, you know, the sort of bad starts or the moments you need to really dive out important. However, key ones for me, 2 Potion, 1 Cape is huge, because if that Charizard starts getting sniped, you need to be able to heal it up, and it needs to still not get one hit by a few Pokemon in the meta. So huge and pretty strong. However, I think the linear nature of Charizard is its downfall to an extent. Again, we've had some players do very well, but I do think that's where it struggles. If we actually jump back into let's take a look at matchups here, and then let's flip this to the worst matchups. Again, this is sort of accurate and sort of not at the same time. But is there any bad matchups with... Oh, there we go. Magnezone Hitmonlee, also up here as well, is rocking a 25% matchup, which is horrendous. Darkrai Greninja, another terrible matchup, which is pretty popular as well. So yeah, you can see some of the bad matchups. The best matchups, if we can just go back again onto 100%. Let me just scroll down to those relevant sample size. This is the reason why it's doing well. We'll get to Exeggutor in a minute, but it can beat up Exeggutor quite reliably because the Moltres can tank enough Exeggutor hits, probably, maybe with double potions, to then get Charizard online. And once that happens, it just one-shots Exeggutor, one-shots Celebi, and so on. So yeah, that's why it's relevant in the meta, but you will struggle against a lot of the other meta decks as well. So as is always the case in Pokemon, it's a tough call. However, I do think that Charizard is just a bit linear for it to be a real staple and not struggle a little bit, because if this game had just like 4 decks that everyone was playing, you could position things much better. But because, as we can see as I scroll down, there's still so much variation in the decks you face, it's really hard to take a deck that has such like skewed matchups perform, even though players are, of course, doing it, but on the whole, below 50%. Next up, we can look at Celebi Exeggutor. There's Exeggutor Mew here. There's Exeggutor Yanmega. There's probably more somewhere down here. But really, for me, the Exeggutor Celebi is huge. I'm guessing this is the one with the Mew. Let me check. Oh, no, this is a little bit different. Okay, so this says no Mew but one Shaman in there. Okay, let me just check some of the list just to triple check. The Shaman there. Okay, so they've gone for the new development here. There's just the one Celebi in this one as well. So this seemingly is without Mew. But I do personally think Exeggutor and then some form of Celebi combination with or without Mew is the meta terror right now. It's so consistent, and I think what this does, it has some bad matchups, which we can go a quick look at as we get to the good numbers here. Let me scroll down. It has like a bad matchup, as we saw, versus Charizard. It doesn't have a great matchup at all versus Gyarados and Greninja. But other than that, in terms of popular decks, it's good against pretty much everything else. And as you can tell from like the amount of scrolling I'm doing, not only is it good versus a lot of the meta decks, it's also good against sort of the more out there, slightly random, less represented builds because it's so consistent and Exeggutor is just such a monster, right? Like, it's so consistent to get out, the Exeggutor. Then you've got Rocky Helms or Giant Capes to put on, as well as potions, as well as Ericas. And just to get through this is a task that a lot of decks struggle to even do once. And then when you realize they could either have a second Exeggutor or a Celebi in the backline ready to go, it is very, very difficult. So I think for me, this is like the meta dominator right now. And if you can't beat this deck, or at least have an okay plan against it, then you're probably not going to do so well in a tournament overall. Because even if you dodge some in Swiss, you're probably going to hit them then in the top cut. So yeah, this deck performing very well as I skip through all these. Next up, Gyarados Greninja. I'm not really going to look at the deck list. I will post a link to this bracket and everything underneath so you can browse it at your leisure, of course. But for me, Gyarados Greninja, it's decent still. It's doing not great, but acceptable. The worry is when you play Gyarados Greninja, even though a few got to the top cut and got to the finals in the last week, when so many decks are playing Bench Snipe and they've lent more back towards Sabrina's as well, this deck just naturally struggles. Next one up, we have Magnezone Hitmonlee. This deck's been getting pretty popular and has some really good results, honestly. Shock Horror, it's 2 Magnezones, and then 2 Marshadows, 2 Hitmonlee, and 1 Hitmonchan. So you've got a bit of a front line while you build these up. So basically what you really want to do is have Hitmonlee or Hitmonchan in the front, have a Marshadow loaded in the back to like revenge snipe, and then fall back on Magnetons if you need it at the end to finish the game. No EXs in this deck, which again makes it a little bit more resistant, takes a little bit more time to knock it out since you have to plow through 3 separate Pokemon with like, not great health, but decent health on those Magnetons. And next up, of course, we have a Darkrai Greninja doing pretty well at 56%. With a lot of games under its belt as well. 105 players brought this. To me, personally, it's a bit of a dull deck. These are choosing to play Kangaskhan in this, or Kangaskhan making a bit of a return, being a little bit more of an active Pokemon and more of an active participant in the game than Druddigon normally is. No Rocky Helmets in this list, but 1 Potion, 1 Cape, just to drag the game out a little bit. And then, of course, building up the Darkrai, you've got options to go aggressive with Kangaskhan, and the Greninjas do the Greninja thing. Pretty sure, I don't think this shows it, but this is almost certainly Dark only, of course, and the Greninjas are just there to snipe. But still, pretty strong. Not the most mind-blowing deck for me. I'm not, even though I like Greninja as a Pokemon and Darkrai, I think the whole like 20, 20, 20, 20, 20 can be a little bit dull to play. That's just me, of course. This is a list with Druddigon in here as well. So again, you can pick Druddigon, you can pick Kangaskhan, whatever you like. But yeah, it's doing pretty well. We talked about Exeggutor earlier, the one with Mew, just near as damn it 50%, so not too bad at all. We'll touch on this, but again, for me, I think I mentioned this maybe last week, but the Palkia Manaphy, this Articuno Vaporeon deck, for me, I always just think Palkia's a one-of. I think it is just one of those backlines, bring it in to take control of the game. But if you have to start Palkia, it feels pretty bad. Now, of course, you want a lot of Pokemon because you want to have Manaphy to start and then start actually, gaining energy on these Pokemon. But I just feel for me, Palkia can get a bit too sticky. If your opponent has like bench snipe and then pulls it into the active slot, it can get a little bit tricky as well. Yes, there's 2 Leaf, but things start to snowball out of control. And of course, there's a certain element where Misty just digs you out of a lot of these problems. But for me, Palkia as a sort of main hitter, of course, there's the Articuno to pick up some slack. But for me, just Palkia alone, really, as a you sort of main win condition, doesn't really do it, personally. And that's sort of reflected in these results. Now, again, I talk about the results, above or under 50%. There's a lot of players here, and everyone can't win everything. And there are some players who are getting good scores with it, as we can see here. So it's not like a terrible deck. I just think it slacks a little bit. Here we have the rise again of the sort of day one deck of Darkrai Weavile. I do think there's something to be said for this list. I am a Honchkrow enjoyer. I've been playing the list, which is Weavile, 2 Honchkrows and Spiritombs instead of the Darkrai. That feels pretty good because even though this has bench snipe of Spiritomb, so you can then Cyrus, and you can see here, double Cyrus, double Sabrina in this list. Even though it has that, I personally just think the 50 damage from Honchkrow is very powerful, as well as the extra health. However, this is obviously no pushover deck at all. This is a nightmare to play against a lot of the time because of that double Cyrus, double Sabrina. Basically, your opponent can almost force in Pokemon whenever they want to then hit hard with the Weavile. And it makes retreating an absolute nightmare because you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't, with having 2 of each. You basically play the game just saying, yeah, my opponent can bounce my Pokemon whenever they want. Next up here, just taking a quick look. Again, 2 Cyrus, 2 Sabrina. This list doesn't even run Spiritomb, which does surprise me a little bit with the fact of having 2 Cyrus in there. So relying more on retreats than anything else. But there is Double Dawn there, so I'll be able to just like push energy from Darkrai into the Weavile, which makes perfect sense. Okay, we'll definitely touch on this one because this deck has been doing well for a while. I did a video previously, make sure to check it out. It's about Gallade EX. I did well in a tournament recently with it, and I talked about Lucario a good chunk in that video and how I don't like it in a lot of decks. However, in this deck, it keeps doing well. I keep seeing this deck pop up. I keep seeing having good results. Now, I don't know about this card for card build specifically, although this is the best result so far in this tournament. But double Rampardos, double Lucario, the Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, Marshadow. It's a lot of spread, but luckily there's only 2 Pokemon that need 2 energy. And unless things are going wrong, you don't really want or need the energy on the Lucario. So it's not too bad at all. Rampardos is an absolute monster, as if you faced it, you will know. But the high damage, with self-damage if you knock some out, but if you knock something out, you're ahead of the curve anyway. So it's looking pretty good, and it's got enough basics to sort of cover the bases till you can get to the Skull Fossil, which is quite nice. So if you like Lucario, this is the build I suggest if you want some good results. I think in a lot of other fighting builds I've seen, it's just too slow, too clunky, but this seems to make it work, so I do like this a lot. Next up, what do we have that's really going to stand out here? I mean, okay, I should touch on this, even though I don't want to. A resurgence of Articuno EX 18T. Yes, there are more trainer cards, there are more cards to play, so it makes it naturally a bit stronger. You're not playing like stuff like Pokedex and stuff like that people used to. You've got like Mars in here, which I'm a bit higher on Mars than most people, but you've got the double bounce, you've got the tools. I could see maybe dropping something here for an extra tool, not because you need 3, but because you definitely want 1 on each Articuno. But in general, solid list. I don't like it. I think it's really boring, but there's a couple of people making it work. Again, there's a lot of people not making it work here, but it's not terrible if you like that sort of play style. Here, Dalga Melmetal. I talked about this last week, but not doing work at all. Mewtwo Gardevoir, there's still people holding on for dear life here. Not it at all. Like, horrible win rate. Celebi Superior. So this is basically one Exeggutor. I'll just bring it up here. Like, this is like the old list. Oh, it's even the Mythical Island Exeggutor. But if you're playing grass, and unless you're doing something really crazy, this whole line, you could cut even one of these lines and play the Exeggutor EX, and I think that would dramatically increase your win rate, because I just think the Pokemon's that good. So yeah, not playing the sort of good Exeggutor EX list isn't really cutting it. Bastiodon Skarmory. You guys know me, I'm a Skarmory enjoyer. A couple of players have made this work recently across different tournaments as well, but super clean list. Huge highlights being that you always start Skarmory because this starts with a fossil. If you get Rocky Helmet or Cape on it, it really gets the job done. So this is a really cool list. You can win or lose games off the back of Guarded Grail. If you're okay with that, give it a try. It's pretty fun, honestly. What else do we have? So that's honestly, for me, generally what the meta looks like. Now, we'll do the usual trick where if we go into win percentage, we can have a look at what's done really well, even though it's a small amount of games. This is a deck I'm interested in. This player seemed to drop, and I don't know if there's anything else. I'll have to try and have a look. However, Wigglytuff EX, Dusk Noir, is a deck I'm going to try this week. I'll tell you that for free. I'm not sure about the Jiggly split here, but I like Dusk Noir as a card. It's difficult to get to work because it's obviously stage 2 that you don't actually want to play with a lot of the time. However, if you get Wigglytuff up and then you can just keep healing it and then give Wigglytuff Cape, that's a very awkward Pokemon to knock out. And if you do it right, you generally only want one Wigglytuff and then you have 2 Dusk Noirs so they can knock themselves out if needed to keep healing it up. And you still got the Wiggly alive. So this is a deck I'm going to be trying on stream probably tomorrow. Which tomorrow won't make a difference depending on when you watch this video, but I'll be trying this out for sure. Super cool list, super good idea. So we'll have a look. And it looks like they dropped, probably because they're once you go 2 losses, it's probably quite hard to make top cut in this tournament. That makes sense. Still, not a bad run. We have Blastoise EX Palkia as well. This, again, was another drop, but kind of interesting. And goes off what I was saying, where this is like the build, but with 1 Palkia, 1 Vape, and then you like your win conditions are 1 Palkia, 2 Blastoise. So you've got options to build. Whereas instead of going all in on Palkia, you've got the extra bulk of Blastoise along with kind of higher damage output, sort of, but definitely a more cleaner curve going through the Pokemon. No potions here, which surprises me a little bit, but I do guess you have to cut something to fit all this in. But kind of an interesting list, something worth trying, especially as I'm a Blastoise enjoyer. This did pretty well as well. This is something I will highlight. I played this deck a few days ago, and then I think yesterday, maybe the day before, again, doesn't matter to most of you watching this, but I saw Nina, who's a friend of mine, Nina is Noob, play or do a video on this list. I think they just played Skarmory Wormadam, but this one has Heatran in it. It's pretty good. It's very aggressive. Having these as your openers, and if you get Wormadam, you've got 2 steel types with plenty of items, of course, to buff them. Skarmory's only 1 cost, Wormadam's 2, but like it's 50, and you basically do a Misty Flip, and every heads does 30 more damage. It's 1 retreat, 1 retreat. There's a bit more, of course, but this combo, if you want to play aggro, this is aggro. This will get people. Also, 110 health, pretty solid too. And then for some odd matchups, maybe Burmy gets to hit for 30 with some weaknesses, sure, sometimes. And maybe get some Darkrai or something. But in general, pretty cool, honestly. Wormadam surprised me, but the damage feels very high. Again, you flip 1 head to do 80, and it's got 110 health. Is pretty impressive. And did some good work. 5 players brought it, 60% win rate. Not bad at all. There is a Rhyperior here that actually went 6-4. Again, not terrible win rate by any means. This, yeah, I think is very close to the list I streamed last week, which is really funny. The idea being is you play Druddigons obviously to stall. If you get to 1 Rhyperior, 160 health, 150 damage, kind of good. you just knock Pokemon out one after the other with the help of a Giovanni, which isn't in this list actually. You can even knock out stuff like it's some of the more difficult ones, or a lot of Pokemon with Cape as well. So it not the best deck in the world, but it is playable. It's for sure playable. And for those wondering about discarding the cards, once you get a Rhyperior active and ready to fight, you don't care about what's left in the deck most of the time. Like, this is your win condition, and you have it at that point. So cool to see people trying it out. Definitely, definitely nice to see. Take a look at some of these other lists if anything's really catching my... Oh, this one, yes, I did forget to mention it, and I definitely meant to. Pachirisu 18T is starting to take hold a little bit. Again, not crazy performances, but definitely not terrible either. This is the best deck list so far, or at least the best performing. Rocking 6 tools, double Lumberry is interesting. Whilst only running 1 Giovanni, but I think I would cut 1 for a Geo or something, but still pretty cool if you like this, if you like Pachirisu, if you like this style of deck. This is, at least to me, a little bit more fun than Articuno, because I do feel Articuno is very reliant on Misty, whereas this, a little bit less so, right? It's going to pop for 80 pretty much as soon as it can. So if you like Pachirisu, then by all means, a few people have jumped on that one. Other than that, though, I think it's probably fair to show this. It's a low win rate, right? 53 looks good, but it went 7 and 6. But again, around 50% win rate isn't terrible by any means. And I know a lot of people like Garchomp, and this is the list I've seen people play on ladder. Double Garchomp, and then Giratina. It's decent. It's okay. Obviously, you're not running Psychic. You're just using the energy. You're using this as a tank to get to Garchomp. You can hit pretty hard, obviously. There's a red card teched in here as well. So, again, it's not the best deck in the world, but playable, right? Like, 50% in a pretty difficult tournament, probably the hardest tournament, arguably, just because it's got so many players, and by now so many experienced players, is nothing to be sniffed at as well. We do as well, I'll just give a shout out as a cool list too. I'm a fan of Togekiss. I think the card's cool. This is Togekiss as Elf, something I've been trying recently in some Psychic lists as a bench snipe. You don't use the other Lake Spirits, obviously, but 1 energy, deal 20, and it can also hit the active. It's not bad, honestly, and it's just something to get going and maybe defend the Togekiss a little bit. So yeah, not too bad at all. But yeah, that's just a quick overview of how the Swiss has gone, of course. I will, again, link this tournament in the description of the video, so make sure to check it out and support Ursi doing these tournaments. I am going to start running my own sort of Raven League title, kind of work in progress, which is going to be a more sort of casual based weekly mini league that stacks up into a knockout tournament a little bit, after X amount of weeks. However, that'll be announced somewhere else and whenever, soon, TM. Whereas this, again, keep supporting these tournaments. It's great to see. It's great to see so many players involved. I mean, look, I showed you all these, hundreds of players submitting these lists. This goes on and on and on and on. Right, so there's a lot of people wanting to play Pokemon, which is always great to see. And yeah, big takeaways for me. Exeggutor is probably the deck to beat. Darkrai Magnezone still doing well enough, considering everyone's probably very aware of it and trying to beat it. The negatives, like maybe stop trying Palkia as your main win condition index. It's probably not going to work. And then Rampardos Lucario continuing to do well. Even though it looks like a bit of a shaky list, it's still performing. But yeah, just a quick rundown of the tournament, guys. As usual, thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.